I wanted to do some of my thoughts on an electric car. Actually, electric cars are in our everyday life. People don't even realize that they probably see them every week or a couple of times a week. You go to the supermarket, and there's usually a disabled or heavy person driving and around in an electric car, and they also have bags of food and whatever, which we will call a burden or weight with them. And one person after another uses this electric car to help them get around. And the second one in common use is the golf cart. That is also an electric car. They charge it and people play 18 or 36 holes or whatever. They walk for miles, and it carries a few people and the golf carts and golf equipment and the clubs and everything, and it gets them around. Of course, these two don't have the headlights, the air conditioning, the radio, the Bluetooth, the touchscreen radio, and so forth, and all the new technology. Electric cars were really, the first one was 1835. And by 1900, 38% of all cars were electric cars. And actually, electric cars preceded fuel-driven cars. And of course, people didn't use them the way they do now. There wasn't air conditioning, there wasn't radios and headlights to the degree all the lights that we have in cars today, and any special equipment. They did have lights, though. But they only would use it for a few miles. There wasn't many roads, and they would go locally to do things, and they would charge the battery. And in that culture, it sufficed. Henry Ford, who developed the assembly line, made cars more affordable and mass-produced cars, was a friend of Edison's, and they were working on an electric car. And they kind of like put it aside for battery purposes and charging purposes and things like that when the electric starter was first invented. Because before then, regular fuel-driven cars were a problem. The cars had a crank. You'd have to get outside the car, and between the two headlights on the bottom, you'd have to crank this crank to get the engine going for a fuel-driven car. And an electric starter was invented, and it made fuel-driven cars practical. And so they put aside the electric car because of the practicality of the electric starter, and fuel-driven cars were considered usable. In the 1960s, GM developed a bunch of cars, and they had a bunch of people, like in California, test them. And these cars would go like 100 or so miles each way. And they used them for a period of like a year or something. And the people that used them were very happy. They would charge it at the end of the night, and they found them very efficient and very usable. But GM put that aside. The original battery wasn't that good at holding a charge, but then somebody developed an advanced battery. And I think City Service, what we call Citgo today, I think it was City Service, bought up the rights to that battery. So the fuel companies, the oil companies, really didn't want the electric car to exist because that was their business. And like I said in the video that I made, The Plastic World, the biggest thing about oil is plastic and things like asphalt for the roads and everything from a toothbrush to a toilet seat to eyeglasses to the water bottles that people drink when they buy a case of 24 bottles are all have plastic. So right now Tesla is working on an advanced model of the electric car, and the electric car is becoming more practical. The reason it has difficulties in design and everything is because now you have air conditioning, you have radios in the car, you have Bluetooth, you have a lot of equipment. And what I believe is going to eventually happen with the electric car is they're going to have a good charging system in it. Somebody's going to come along and develop a premium charging system, and you won't have to worry about charging the cars. Like we have batteries in the fuel-driven cars, and you don't have to worry about charging the batteries. They have generators and alternators and regulators, and they're going to develop things like that for the electric car. Well, you're not going to have to worry about charging it. And the advantages to the electric car is you don't have fuel emissions, you don't have fumes, you don't have to buy gasoline or ethanol or any of that. And it's a very silent running, efficient engine. Matter of fact, it's so silent that they put little noise makers on the electric cars so that pedestrians will look up and see that the car is there so they don't get run over. But little by little, I think the biggest innovation coming for the electric car is a good charging system, and then you won't have to worry about running and plugging the car in the way you don't have to plug in the car with our fuel-driven vehicles. I think within 10, 15 years, there's going to be such a good charging system developed that you won't have to worry about plugging cars in. It'll just be very efficient. That and solar energy and making cars out of more solar material and advanced charging systems, it won't be necessary to plug cars in.